Welcome to Angels, Positivity, and Love. I'm your host, Michael Andre Ford, and we've got amazing guests from all over the world, incredible backgrounds, incredible foundations from which they turn around and help or serve others. Long storied pasts, quite often, again, from all around the world, all walks of life. Professors, New York Times bestseller folks, healers, and today, no exception, Raghu Markus is coming to us from California. Absolutely fantastic background. I am going to go light on the background. It's a very detailed one. He has been around the block, let's just say that. Ram Dass Foundation, been to India when it kind of counted. I think anytime you go to India, it counts. But there was a certain time or heyday, and the Maharaji was there, Ram Dass. He has had a chance to interact with a lot of the big names across the spiritual landscape. I'd just like to welcome Raghu to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Glad to be here, Michael. Nice to
How?
meet
Oh,
you.
thank you very much. How did you first get on to what we'll call the spiritual path or just discover there's more to the heart, more to the world in and around you?
Uh, do I have to clean up my language, Michael, as I speak to this? I can't. I don't know your audience, so by your face, I'm thinking maybe I should. Let's say I was kind of a really miserable teenager and did not understand what in the world I was handed in terms of the society and the schools and the family and the whole 9 yards that we get in Western culture. And so music saved me. And particularly, of course, back then, Dylan, Bob Dylan, the way he expressed all that stuff, especially in the early days, okay, I'm not the only one thinking like this, so it gave me really a little bit of hope. I wasn't alone, which is the thing that happens to people after they get their names when they're named as a baby. Oh, I'm separate now. I'm going to go through and I'm going to defend that separateness with the story I tell myself and so on. So I was doing all of that, and Dylan helped out a little bit. And then I don't know if you're into jazz or audiences, John Coltrane. John Coltrane was one of the most spiritual artists, musicians in any genre. And I got to see him when I was like 16, 17. They snuck me into a club in Montreal, and I had a first out of body experience when he played my favorite things on alto. I mean, I've told the story a billion times, but it just absolutely changed my life in that moment because then I knew there was a happy place, shall we say. And then as my interest in music grew and so on, it became my profession. I worked at a radio station. I'm from Montreal, so I worked at a radio station in Montreal, one of the largest rock and roll stations in terms of 50,000 watt signal, et cetera, et cetera. And I was a program director, and one day someone called through the front desk and said, would you please announce that Ram Dass is giving a lecture at McGill University, like the Harvard of Canada? And I went, okay, but don't know who that is or what that is. And they said, well, Tim Leary and Richard Alpert. And I went, oh shit, yeah. No, I love them. I love them. Of course, psychedelics were just actually completely in the light of so many different eyes, some of them negative. But so I said, well, send me over a tape and, I'll listen to it and see if I like it. And they did. And of course, every word from him, like with many people, it made so much sense. He was so honest about his own foibles. I totally trusted him. And I was like, wow, yeah, I just listened to this thing. I put it on the air. At this station, nobody had ever heard of anything like that. I mean, never. It was so highly, especially in Montreal, maybe in San Francisco, somebody who might have heard Suzuki Roshi or something, I don't know. But in Montreal, that wasn't happening. So I went out and met him. The switchboard just lit up, by the way. People went crazy. In the middle of the week, in the morning. And then I said, okay, where is he? I got to meet this person. And I went and met him. And in the moment of meeting him, uh, had this extraordinary experience of somebody there, Ram Dass or Richard Alpert, they weren't caring about themselves. They were more or less saying to me without words, what can I do for you? And that was an unusual experience to start with. And then just that presence created a trust that led me not that much down the line. I quit my job and went to India because I knew he was going there.
Hmm.
And I said, I want to go, I want to get whatever you got. You got that Haagen-Dazs thing, I want it. It was that kind of immaturity about it. But deep down, something else was calling, and I had no idea of what it was. And it turned out to be Neem Karoli Baba, who we called Maharaji, in India, in this ashram in the middle of the Himalayan foothills, in the middle of nowhere. And that was even then I said, well, this kind of seems like the beginning of the end, meaning there was no more search. There was no other thing that I needed to get from anybody. I mean, I was there for a year and a half, so it took some time, but not that much time because of what he did, just breaking down the mental structure of believing in my thoughts, believing in the story I was, all of that stuff without any teaching. There was no teaching going on except for the first thing he said was in Hindi, sub ek, there's only one thing going on. And Christ, Hanuman, Krishna, Buddha, it's one. There's only one. So that was the first thing that unfolded in a way that completely changed the direction of my life.
Hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the difference between whatever flows we're talking about when we talk about the heart, whether it's timelessness, no limits, awareness, and then thinking, I don't know, rejection, resisting, reacting, all that stuff. How do you describe the differences between the two?
Well, one is the story that we tell ourselves that emanates from that judging place, which we all know. How about the place that we talk to each other? Sometimes talk to oneself, not each other. You would never talk with somebody else the way in which you sometimes talk to yourself. I mean, very harshly and crudely, right? And that's that place. And from that place, not much can happen except operating system. You need it to get along, to relate with people, to work, to do whatever it is you're going to enjoy, whatever it is you're going to do. It helps to have that. The ego is a wonderful servant, but not such a great master. So one of the things that Ram Dass taught, especially in his later days in Maui, was a meditation moving from your head into the center of your being, center of your chest, in your heart, and taking several deep breaths to actually move there. And once you're there, luxuriate in the awareness, the spaciousness. And one of the main things that happens is your perspective changes because you do not judge the way that you have judged when you've lived up from where you're normally accustomed to. Me land. It's all about me. So a unitive thing kind of happens when you start breathing into that place in the center of your being. So from that place, we can really get free of some of the the bonds that keep us unhappy, period, and separated and selfish and motivated in ways that are not healthy.
So you're a show host, Mind Rolling Podcast, Be Here
Yeah.
Now Network, also with the Ram Dass Foundation, leading it, and so on. Can you talk to us about your teaching role over the years? Have you describe how you've been helping others in your own words?
I think the biggest thing I have to offer is some sense of practicality, of being able to apply some of you mentioned before we got on to this podcast you were trying to figure out how to pronounce Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's name, right? So it's just making me think, wow, because he was a phenomenal teacher, and he was able to really bring in sometimes arcane themes from Tibetan Buddhism and translate them so that people could understand and actually use them in their day-to-day lives. And I hope I mean, I see myself as someone who's very practical, and I think that this is a gift in a way, so it allows people to not, I mean, I don't want to, when I met Ram Dass, by the way, there was no bullshitting. He was not bullshitting himself. And I like to think that I do my best at not BSing myself. And I think that that's a major offering in terms of who I meet and interact with in public or privately or through the podcast.
I can tell you, 13 years, sir, I've been making every misstep when it comes to pronunciation. When I first met Chogyam Trungpa, if you want to say indirectly after his 87 or 88 passing over, I did the American thing, and I'm like, hey, that's a mouthful. Is there another name people can call you by? He asked for his younger photo, and he said, sure, call me Gentle Frank. And so people have addressed him that way. He's had two former students of his get a chance to reunite on the other side, or whatever
Really?
definition you have. Yeah.
Yeah.
They get to directly hear and see. Here are two quotes from him in 2014. And I'd like you to just take these, at face value, take it with a grain of salt, take me with a grain of salt. I'm enthusiastic. But here are the two quotes, but if you can run with them because they're beautiful. I've very little that I remember, but these two quotes, I still have to read them, are incredible. Here's one from 2014 from Chogyam Trungpa, who won't say Rinpoche. Taking one breath is like taking one step. Both bring peace and harmony. And then a second one is, this is one of my all-time favorites. The way to experience nowness is to realize that this very moment, this very point in life, is always the occasion. Can you run with that and share with us?
He had such a way with words, a way with teaching too. I met him and quite a number of times because he had a place in Vermont, not just over the border, the Canadian border, where my family had a farm, and so we used to go there actually with Ram Dass, and he tortured Ram Dass in those days. He was incredible. There's actually, I think we have the talk that he gave, and it was called Tale of the Tiger. It's now called Karma Choling, I believe. And he gave a talk about Don Juan, the Yaqui, way of, I forget what the actual name of the book is called, but Carlos Castanedas, the author, went to Mexico and met this brujo. So it was expounding on that, and Ram Dass, and we were in the audience, and then he said, Ram Dass, come on up here. So Ram Dass went up. He said, okay, you want to talk about the way of the warrior? Do you realize, he said, how we need to be responsible? He didn't say for what, just responsible. And then they went back and forth on stage, and at one point Ram Dass started meditating, right? And Trungpa, who used to smoke and drink at his talks, he dropped some ashes, blessing Ram Dass on his head, and the whole crowd went crazy. It was just nuts. So yeah, what he's saying, what Ram Dass represented also for many, many years, which is that occasion is now. It is the only sense that we can have of being truly embodied in our hearts, is that occasion of now. There's no past, there's no future. There is just, Ram Dass put it in a different way. He would say, talk about luxuriating in the moment. So you get that feeling of letting go. He loved hot tubs too, so you can get the image right. So yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, beautiful. And there's Jane Roberts Seth, kind of the 1970s, maybe a light being. Light being you can also meet, but he said it's not going to be found externally. It'll be found through the reality. I'd say the heart or the gateless gate,
Yeah.
the Zen stuff through here, through the reality you knew into a broader reality. I'll also kick it over to Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman's
Mm.
film with Nick Nolte, or the book Way of the Peaceful
The
Warrior.
book, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about it the same way. And then finally, Esther Hicks, who's maybe a little more modern, Abraham Hicks, she also describes it that way, I believe. Can you talk about your own personal stepping through the doorless door, just a couple of different moments? It could be the out of body stuff, but what could you share with us that really drove home the point of how big everything is? And it ain't through grasping you're going to get there.
That's a mouthful. Listen, I mean, as redundant as this might sound to you and everybody listening, when I met that being who wore a blanket, all of everything that I had constructed got completely evaporated.
Hmm.
Not that I didn't go back to, you always go back. It's 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, that whole thing. But once I understood the immensity of what that is, now I look back and I think it was more like a computer, because I never met anybody that you didn't have an exchange kind of thing going on. There was no transaction going on, if you can imagine such a thing. So once I understood that the unconditionality of that, which in the core of my being, then, I never looked for a thing after that, ever. I have not to this day, and I meet many teachers. I was just with one the other day, a beautiful Tibetan Lama, and we share space, and many of them are very wise and have siddhi, spiritual powers, and so on. And whatever I'm supposed to enjoin with, I do. And I leave it up to the universe to provide that. But ultimately, I really understood the breaking of the mind right away. And this is, I'm early 20s at that time. So it was very fortunate. Now, decades I've spent since then in and out of all sorts of, as they say in Yiddish, mishugas,
Oh,
craziness.
spinning. Yep.
Yeah, spinning. I mean, spin, you come back, so it's good for people to know there's a natural rhythm to the unfolding of a human being, of an incarnation. It's once you get aligned with that, then the downs aren't, rustling you quite the same way they used to. And that's what I find in myself as well. But yeah, the immensity, the enormity of what we are is extraordinary. And I was fortunately able to see it in this being that, and I did meet a couple after that. One was that were the same. One was a Tibetan, actually the third in line. So there's the Panchen Lama that the Chinese took and kidnapped, and he's never been heard from since. The Dalai Lama that we all know, who's actually in America right now. And the third one his name was Karmapa. And Karmapa was in Los Angeles before he died. This is also decades ago. And I got to see him. So in that process, there was a line of people getting blessed by him. So you were standing right in front of him and you got blessed with a silk called a kata scarf. And I was about, I don't know, 10, 12 feet away, waiting for my turn. And then suddenly I got hit by this wave of energy, and oh my God, it's the same thing as I knew with Neem Karoli Baba, absolutely the same. And then that was something that really expanded that whole the immensity, the enormity of what is. That expanded that so that you know, I couldn't believe it. How could two energies be completely the same, of these two beings? It was just extraordinary. Anyhow, yeah, so it is enormous.
I'll ask you about an out of body experience in just a second, but do you recall the author Karl Hammerschlag, Dancing Healers, The Theft of Spirit, or The Theft of the Spirit, his two books? Does that ring a bell at all? He was a Yale
No, no, it
doctor.
doesn't. No.
He's up on the
Yeah.
shelf behind me there. He's passed away since, like about 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Mm,
He and Patch Adams were super tight, loved the humor avenue to the heart. But he came out of Yale Medical School as a doctor, knowing it all, harboring some definite resentments. He ended up through the Bureau of Indian Affairs on a reservation in a hospital where just people went to die and not the first choice. They would go through the healing, the normal way, the natural way, the medicine man, and then nothing else was working. They'd come to find him. But the medicine man actually took him under his wing. And
huh.
later he got a second degree psychology, I guess. So he sort of doubled. And later he got serious about how big the universe is and switched gears. And he taught everything that he learned. But I got to mention, just he got into a what are those wooden huts that are dark and the smoke and the rocks, and it's a ceremony, Native American, and he's listening to the rattle, and
Sweat lodge.
yeah, sweat lodge, and someone's leading it, but he hears the rattle, and it's a pretty big crowd, pretty big sweat lodge, and it's pitch black. He can't see anything. The rattle's all the way over there, but the universe had it thunked him straight on the middle of the head. And this is from the Dancing Healers, I think, his first book. Beautiful book. But
Mm,
it thunked him on the head as sort of a slap in the head or in
mm.
the back of the head to get him to pay attention and start learning again. He had tightened up. And it's just beautiful. It reminded me a little bit of what you had said. So I want to give you another catchphrase, or like one of the rare things I can actually remember. It is this quote, which is the holy hand grenade of spirituality and the what if or the rub for all of us. You can be happy now in this very moment for no reason whatsoever. What do we do with that?
I don't know what we do with that.
That's a good one.
Um, yeah, that's just, yeah, having fun with the reality of there's nothing to do but inhabit the present moment, just as that Trungpa quote that you made earlier. So why bother thinking about it?
Hmm. Did you like Joseph Campbell when he was around? Did you enjoy listening to him?
Mm, yeah, definitely.
What do you like about him?
I think he really helped people get out through, the whole thing around myth and so on. Just get out of rational mind. That's the most difficult thing for people because we are born into it. As I said before, we get a name and now we know we're separate entities. And I think he did a lot he contributed a lot to allowing people to go beyond their rational minds about this. And I think that happened in spades to this day, you know.
I'm going to give you 2 to 4 random quotes, but I'm going to read them. It could be Wayne Dyer. It could be anybody. It could be St.
Mm,
Augustine. I have no idea. But any
love Wayne.
reaction you have and that you can run with it or it taps into a part of your journey along the way would be great. First is Eckhart Tolle. And have you had a
Mm.
chance to, I don't know, attend a event with him?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I spent some time with him and Ram Dass actually once.
What's your take on Eckhart?
I think he's actually a wonderful person, but before we met him, we thought, Ram Dass and I, we weren't quite sure what we were going to get. They were going to do a thing together, so they decided, let's get together. So he came over. And we were, because he comes from Germanic stock, very reserved, which is what we thought. And of course, it was just absolute garbage projections that we all do all the time, right? He walked in the door, and the first person he met was one of Ram Dass's caretakers, right? Ram Dass was in a wheelchair then from a stroke. And normally, anyone, say, quote unquote, celebrities, in this case, spiritual celebrity, they go right over to the person that, the other spiritual celebrity, right? He stopped and he completely engaged with this young man who was one of the caretakers. And as soon as I saw it personally, when I saw that, I went, okay, I'm so full of shit. Oh my God. And he came and he hung out and he was absolutely living in his heart and expressing what you would expect if you had read any of his books. And he was very gracious too around Ram Dass and saying, you know, this wouldn't, what I did wouldn't have happened without your Be Here Now book. He was really, yeah.
Now, a quick public service announcement for people watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, like, share, do something. Put a few words in. But if you're having trouble sleeping at night, we have a practical tip. There's Power of Now and New Earth. All you have to do is grab that book. I don't care if you're renting it from the local library, buying it used, whichever. Maybe purchase a new copy to help the author out. But try leaving that on your nightstand. You've been having trouble sleeping. Your ego is going to have to make a decision, and it usually chooses a full night's sleep over ever reading the text in an Eckhart Tolle book. You'll make it 2 paragraphs, get really sleepy, and the brain says, no more of the book. You're going to get a good night's sleep. Trust me, and you're out. So
I get a lot of people coming to me and say, if I listen to the podcast you put, I go to sleep with you every night. I'm like, okay, TMI on that one, but God bless you, no matter what happens.
Now, I was a publicist for 18 years. You didn't just tell people you put them to sleep. I'm kidding. Okay, here are your quotes, though. Eckhart Tolle, ego implies unawareness. Awareness and ego cannot coexist. I'm randomly thumbing through, so you're going to get it randomly done here. Smile more. This is Angels talking on this quote. Smile more, think less. Do not permit others to dictate your well-being. Own your own being in life. One more or 2 more quotes. The inner warrior experience is like a path up a big mountain. At the top, there are amazing views, but to see anything, your eyes must be open or opened, whichever way you want to interpret it. Another angel. And finally, Einstein. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive. Were any of those quotes ones that struck you in some way and rippled that you would want to talk in a certain direction?
Well, they went by so fast. What about the one going up the mountain? Was that it?
The inner warrior experience is like a path up a big mountain. At the top, there are amazing views, but to see anything, your eyes must be open, and add an ED at the end, opened as well.
Yeah, no, that definitely struck me. And what struck me was, and I'll tell the audience and you a story. I have a very close friend. His name is Krishna Das. He's been part of our tribe for forever. We were in India together with Neem Karoli Baba. He's the chant master, according to the New York Times, of American yoga. But he's in Europe now. I mean, he's amazing. There he is, Krishna Das. Krishna Das. Anyhow, he found Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba in Mumbai one day, and and he was told, okay, get a hotel room, and then Maharaji would come over to the hotel room with a close devotee, but a translator, someone who spoke English. So because Maharaji did not speak English, although we knew he knew what he could if he wanted to, and he did at times. Anyhow, he says to Krishnadas in that moment, and this is the relation to the story or the quote that you just did. He said, Krishnadas, courage is a very big thing. And that's all. The translator said, wait a minute now, this is bhakti yoga, yoga of the heart, devotional yoga, and guru, the grace of the guru. He was saying there is no such thing as, that means you're doing something, right? Or something like, I don't know what, but that's what he said. And Maharaji looked back to Krishna, said, courage is a very important thing. For the rest of his life, to this day, whenever there's any, the tumbling that life gives you, that thing comes to his head, and the understanding is it's not that it's the warrior part. And you know what the warrior part is? It's a commitment that you make to be courageous, in that you aren't going to shy away from suffering. You aren't, when a good example is people are going to leave us, absolutely going to leave us. The courage is, yes, you're going to have grief, but at the same time, and this is another Ram Dass thing, you can live on more than one plane of consciousness at the same time. You have the grief, but you also have the love, because that's the real bond that you had with this person, whoever it may be. So courage means having the intention to be able to live on more than one plane of consciousness at the same time, in terms of something like this, or to even address the suffering that comes our way, at least with a little. Ram Dass did this very well. I mean, he was in horrible pain. He had a stroke. He was 22 years in a wheelchair, half paralyzed. Okay, so he was speaking from experience, and he would use it as a way to wake up. And that's a big thing, and it takes a lot of courage. And going up the mountain takes courage.
Beautiful.
Never mind what you see at the top.
Exactly. That was beautiful. Okay, one more of these quotes, at least one more. But this is a classic, and I have to backpedal here. If I'm 56 now, this is in the 90s. I'd moved to New York City. I did not have an official diary, but it might as well have been a diary. I'm not admitting to having a diary, but here it is. I somehow ended up writing all these incredible quotes down, and in one of the quotes was the expression non-duality. And it wasn't until I bought my first ever home in Austin, Texas, probably 2007, so it was around 2009 or 10. I'm sitting in an Acura dealership parking lot on a curb outside with leaves swirling. Somebody had given me Thich Nhat Hanh's Pieces Every Step, the littlest book in the world, the only non-sentence in the whole book. I didn't have anybody I could call. I wasn't bright enough to go to the library or actually search out the definition of non-duality, but in that book was the only incomplete sentence he's probably ever had in any book. He was writing about blah, 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 non-duality, period, not two, period. And I had sat on it, I think, for 18 years. I can't do the math. And in that moment, I realized non-duality actually had an easy definition. And I'm like, oh my God, I waited 18 years for that. Here's the original quote. Again, I'm going to do the best I can for pronunciations. Everyone who's watched the show, 50 episodes last year. We've gone to 3 episodes this year, 112. We're booked into March of 2025. They know I can't pronounce anything. Siddha Katrapa. Here's the quote, though, more importantly. Whatever the yogin sees is his instruction, and realization that all he sees is unborn. That is the most excellent guru. Innocence is the way to realize non-duality, for here the effects of virtue and vice are one. I thought it a beautiful quote, enough to write it down and worry about it for 2 decades. What's your reaction to this quote?
I work with publishers a lot, right? Getting books published rather. And one publisher said, I actually was trying to help Krishnadas, who we were just talking about. He was going to do a book, and it would be a book that would be, the centerpiece would be the, not just devotion, but certainly bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion. But what I mean by that is we have all been highly steeped in Buddhism, one way or the other. Our practices from that time on were Buddhist. The people that we saw, like this Karmapa that I saw just before he left, it was crucial. But meanwhile, and by the way, Tibetan Buddhism is a tremendous combination of devotion and non-dualism. But God, when you say, non-dual, Michael, all the words just wash away. I mean, the best definition the best thing I could say in reference to what you're saying is, um, it refers to emptiness, which is a major, major concept of Buddhism. And most people, they think of it in a nihilistic way, empty. There's nothing, nihilism, nothing. And it's the opposite of that. It's as Bob Thurman speaks to it around as uh, the womb of bliss is what emptiness is. But but in practical terms, it's empty of the me,
Mm.
right? That's what we're talking about. So, as far as non-duality is concerned, um, I mean, how much you reach for in terms of your own progression in life to become and fulfill your destiny. And I like to think that my reach is around how do I get kinder, more compassionate? How do I listen to people way better than I do? How do I feel the unconditionality that you can feel with humans? It's okay for us to just be together and we don't have to keep jousting back and forth in this transactional dance, right? That is just out of fear, out of separation, and so on. So I met Mr. Non-Dual in a body in Neem Karoli Baba. I met it. And what it was somebody who only give a shit about, who only cared about other people. He did not there was nothing about him. That's non-duality. That's why they call these people like Shirdi Sai Baba, Neem Karoli Baba, the Karmapa, and others, Ananda Mahima. These people don't care. They have nothing to fulfill in their lives. They're only here to help whoever it is that sits in front of them. And that kind of, there she is. Can you believe that I actually met her and hung out with her? I mean,
Can you
I'm,
tell us about that next when you're done with this?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But all to say is, um, the non-duality that the best example people probably have around experiencing it themselves, because it can get very heady and you get very attached to concepts and it's counterproductive in my mind, you know. But, the the um, the wonder and the mystery is to me what it's all about. And fixing yourself into a place of how can I understand non-duality. There are tremendous teachings all around it. Just being Dzogchen is one Tibetan teaching that is just being what is with yourself, basically. These are all great teachings. But for me, if you spend too much time trying to find the right teaching that'll explain to you what non-duality is, I think we're missing the point. We have to step back into what can we do to help each other.
It can be a little bit like a shiny yogurt machine in a warehouse with a
Yeah,
thousand people around it doing this. And then one person walks up, gets a serving of beautiful strawberry yogurt and starts eating it, and yum.
yeah, yum, yum, yum. Yeah.
I wanted to ask another term before we jump to Ananda Mayama. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Suchness. Is it the same thing as what we were just talking about? And a quick aside, Eckhart Tolle mentioned no thing in one of his books or one of his audio CDs, and it was a beautiful story of the realization. He's on a property, he saw a sign, and I think it was the word nothing, but it hit him as no thing. And it was another one of
Mm,
those momentary, whoa, everything slowed down,
yeah.
and he was like swimming into more consciousness and so on. So between no thing and suchness, can you keep going?
Okay.
Just a breaststroke or two.
Yeah, right. Um, Suchness is a good word. I like it. It's it relates for me to what happened. There's one thing in bhakti yoga So people express their love for the divine in bhakti yoga in many different ways. And one of them is through singing, chanting. And there's a thing called bhab, which is the emotion of connecting with the divine in as the mantra is being repeated in a melodic way, basically what we're talking about. So suchness, you get to suchness, as they say in India. Very good. You get to suchness, which is the essence of what we are about. Suchness is the essence that happens between us that we're doing in this one moment. We don't know each other from Adam, and we're having suchness. No thing I don't know about. It's too intellectual for me. But I understand what he's saying. But I like suchness a lot better.
Anandamayama.
Anandamayama was suchness. That's all there is to it.
When did you meet her? In her later years or middle years?
Later years. Well, I think she died. She was in her 80s, so maybe 65, 70, something like that before she died. How about this? I was with my father. My father came to see my brother, myself, and my future wife in India. We ended up in Benares. Oh, this is a whole other story. It would take maybe another whole podcast. We've almost been an hour as it is. But when my father showed up, Neem Karoli Baba looked at me and said, "Did you give your father the medicine?" And I went, "Yeah, he had a cold. I gave him some aspirin." He went, "Nay, yogi medicine that Ramdas gave me." I went, "Acid?" And my father went, "LSD?" He said, "Take care of your father while he's in India, okay? And meet me in 2 weeks somewhere else." We went to Benares. Anandamayima had an ashram in Benares. So before we went to see her, though, I did get some acid. He did take it. I mean, he's a 50-odd-year-old businessman. He was in advertising and marketing, he was like Don Draper, basically. And he even had the same furniture, So he took it. He had been a World War II bomber pilot. He had PTSD that he didn't acknowledge. He thought he wasn't afraid of dying. He didn't dream anymore, all of your classic PTSD symptoms. And so this acid brought him down into his body, so to speak. All that was happening, Benares is a place where people go to die. They've been burning bodies on the banks of the Ganges River, for thousands of years. And we stayed in a houseboat on the Ganges River, like sometimes they can't get enough wood to burn the body, and the body's going down. There's porpoise in there, and they're eating them. It's just something. It's quite a scene.
Yeah.
And he went through all of that, and he came out the other side a completely different. We went back. We saw Neem Karoli Bob. He never said a word about it whatsoever. He just told him stuff nobody else could know about a farm he had and horses that he saved. And my father went boom, fell flat on his face, and that was. From then on, we had a wonderful relationship. My whole family was saved, so it was like that. But after that, we went and we were just walking up some stairs. Someone told us, "Oh, there's a great saint in Nandamayima." Walked all these stairs up. There was nobody there. So we were walking around going, "This is weird." And then suddenly we hear a female voice singing. And we followed the sound. It was her and just two other ladies. And she was singing to Krishna. And we had that, what is called in India, darshan, being in the presence of the divine, basically. So, but she was, I met a couple of women saints, and she was definitely that. And she just emitted her name, right? Ananda Mahima, bliss-filled mom, is what that means. And you were around her, and that's what you got. Suchness. Suchness is great. I'm glad you brought that word up. I love it.
Okay, I'm going to read something that's from angels, but if you just want to call them loving beings, awesome. Here, it's a a little 4 paragraphs, should be 40 seconds here. What's up with mankind? Why angels now? Just meaning they might be a little more available. Awareness for mankind is on the horizon. Call it a spiritual awakening if you wish. It's a chance for all to grow. Mankind is ready for more unconditional love and compassion for all. And more compassion by all for all is needed. Mankind is ready for change from rat race mode. Happiness is obtained in the absence of ego. Ego's afraid to be vulnerable, to let go, and to be in the unknown. Again, there's nothing to lose and nothing to gain. Move past seeing the negative. Compassion can be taught through one's actions. How? Slowing down would do a world of wonder for most people. Doing it consistently is where the problems and opportunities lie, so stay present. Start right now. Letting go means less thinking. Do not get lost in perceived tasks, roles, ego, etc. Being in the moment is to do compassion for all. I'll cut it off there.
That's great.
Yeah,
Where's that from?
Angels, I was seeing Balls of Light as I typed a little book in 2014.
Oh, yeah? Oh, nice.
It's a very gentle book, but that's as complex as it gets. Can you just, react to that and take us where you usually take us, which is a lot of fun here.
I love that, actually.
Can I read 2 more paragraphs? It actually had some more meat to it.
Yeah.
Okay. For individuals, an egoless path would be great, but it's just not realistic. Allow ego to serve as a reminder when it pops up. A reminder for what? You decide. How about a reminder to breathe? How about a reminder to enjoy each moment as it comes? Believe that all moments can be the same. Whether it's a moment at work or a moment looking at nature, all moments are the same and peaceful. Only thinking something can interfere with this. Likewise, they're not separate paths for mankind or separate worlds for individuals. One is one. Through awareness and owning the consequences of one's thoughts and actions, a person begins to see how all of life is truly interconnected in one. Faith in all can lead to a change in mankind. This is the path for all of man. This is about man bringing peace and joy to all. And this is about your personal growth in your life and finding the next stage in your soul's development, as well as the continued evolution of mankind. The greatest gift is allowing all is growth and change. This is frightening for some. There's nothing to do here. Slow down the doing. Instead, breathe, smile, and relax. Appreciate all. Very last paragraph. Compassion for all is life. This is also about acceptance for all. Regard others as yourself generously and without fixation. Believe in all. And now you got to talk, because I just talked the most.
No, there's nothing to say. You just said it all.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
but what's it bring you back to? You've had a lot of experience.
Well, what it makes me think, though, I mean, when more towards the beginning of this piece, we need this more than ever right now. I think that that's true. I mean, historians might say, you know, there's been some pretty awful times over the history of our race. And so to say that this is it, so this is more of a contemporary time, I think. But there is such wild division, polarization, and it's, it stems from, and why what you just read is a little bit of a panacea for it. It stems from inside ourselves. We've got to slow down. We've got to be spending more time in the moment. We have to have the intention to help other people. And we have to realize what we are doing by virtue of polarization to the other side. We are right, they are wrong, and there's no in between whatsoever. So it is very true that we have an opportunity now to take this as a gigantic collective karma, right? That we absolutely have to attend to, and the only way we can do that, in my mind, is to fix our own hearts so that we can be around people radiating some kind of peace and not this anxiety that is so strung out through our culture, and not even just America, but the West, basically. That's not even true. The whole world, really. I mean, you think about it, there's so much difficulty. So yeah, I am completely at one with the sentiment that you read. I think it's pretty far up.
Well, Ananda Mayama, I think, said something about everybody's right, and that just took the whole right or
Mm,
wrong and the judging thing out of the equation.
yeah.
I'll mention I've never met anybody who goes out the door or says, I'm going to waste all my energy for the next week. I'm going to be wrong on everything. It
Mhm.
just doesn't happen. And yet that's all we do when we trip along. And finally,
Yeah.
Mother Teresa said, if you judge someone, you have no time to love them. I mean, it takes usually 1,000 different ways to drive the message home. Um, we'll wrap this up in a second, but I'm going to give you a bunch of words on a list. And what jumps out at you? If you had to have a t-shirt for a mantra, you can make it up and just ditch the list. But here are your words as I throw a pen. Okay, positivity, love, kindness, attention, compassion, appreciation, gratitude, allowing all, opening openness, or here's the long one. And I thought I had an original saying once. I don't. Remember to remember if you can remember to remember when you remember. But it turns out Somyel Rinpoche, now that I say it correctly, said remember to remember for 35 years to his students. I saw that in a Tibetan book of dying that no one was near the bookshelf in a bookstore. It
Oh,
fell
yeah.
off the shelf, turned to the page of the prologue, and it said
Yeah.
remember to remember 35 years. That's what he
Mhm.
said. And
Well,
I said, yeah,
that's what our foundation is. Love, serve, remember, which is
yes.
the only three pieces of instruction that we got from Neem Karoli Baba. Love everyone, serve everyone, and remember the divine.
Oh,
So
that's full
we're
circle. I didn't see that
that's
one coming.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do one act because we've only had two guests out of 180 that haven't done anything before, during, or after the show. You are not committed to doing anything. I'm going to explain what I'm doing. This is something that I was like 10 or 12 years ago sitting on a couch in Austin, Texas. I think it was HBO, and I was watching Celestine Prophecy, the movie. But as another guest said, in the 70s, they were doing it this way to see light between your fingers. In India, not everybody in India, but a small portion, they see light this way between your fingers because I have to stand up and use a background. I can't do it this way. You have an opportunity to be in your heart, but at home, they've seen this before. You can see any color of light. It'll be the flow, the force from Star Wars. I'm going to embarrass myself further and do Yoda's voice to help Raghu laugh enough that he's in his heart, sing with his heart, and doing the Zen thing, sing without saying, if he decides it's okay to see light between my fingers. And you're going to get a dad joke as well. Dad joke first, Yoda second. Here it goes. And just say if you see anything, you don't have to comment, and then we go straight to the closing. First, the dad joke. Where in a hospital is the worst place to play hide and seek? In the ICU. And then second, do not. There is no try. And just see if you see a little of Michael's energy as a little filament or wisp of light. And Raghu, what are you seeing in California as the show host is being a dork in Texas?
I might have even seen a little filament, maybe.
Okay, but is it a wisp? And hey, you get a bonus dad joke just because we can. Why
So,
did, why did the rabbit fall down that well? He didn't see that well.
okay, that's really bad.
Yep. And is it clear? Is it white? Is it yellow? Is it gold? What are you seeing?
I
And
don't see anything now, but at one moment when you first started, there was a little bit of red filament.
Prima, we're off the hook. You're
You
keeping our guests.
really?
You're keeping our
Can I,
guest statistic at 0.5%. I think I did that right. Whatever two is out of 180. Okay, now for closing stuff, I want to say,
can I mention something before we cut this?
please.
I just plug something. I'd like to plug
Oh,
something.
plug away.
Because
Absolutely.
you were mentioning about you mentioned Eckhart, get a couple of his books, books, audio books, and put them on at night, and you'll be asleep faster than you ever could imagine. Which is probably true. I'm not sure. I haven't listened to his audiobooks. But I have an audiobook done with another close friend of mine, Duncan Trussell, who's a major podcaster. And it addresses, the reason I'm thinking of it, not the only reason, it addresses a lot of what we've been talking about. It's called The Movie of Me to the Movie of We. And it talks about just what we've been talking about, and how I shared my own troubled youth, shall we say, and the building of this story that it's still there. It just doesn't, it's a little shmoo, not a big one,
Mm.
as Ramdas would say. And and then how to transform ourselves into an altruistic perspective. And what are the things that we can do, and what's the reality behind it all? And Duncan is a stand-up comedian, so it's a very funny, entertaining 12 hours audiobook, The Movie of Me to the Movie of We. Go to audible.com.
And
Thank you.
No, thank you for doing that. And I want you to plug another thing towards the end as well. How can people follow your show, Mind Rolling Podcast? But in just 1 second, here's one last intellectual exercise or spiritual exercise, or we'll call it from the heart. Here it is: compassion. Because I don't think we talked about compassion, and there's a trillion definitions of compassion, but we don't have time for naming them all. Compassion is always a bigger perspective and appreciation for what already is. Red Shirt, a Native American chief, a historical figure people can meet. He said that in probably like 2015 or something. What's your reaction to that? And again, compassion is always a bigger perspective and appreciation for what already is. Can you leave us with a compassionate response?
Okay, the only thing that I hear in that quote is the fact that we as humans have no choice as long as we are inhabiting somewhat the heart space, the suchness that we have been talking about. We have no choice but to turn to another person and do what's obvious.
A hug. Okay.
Great meeting you.
You got to do a closeout. You're a
professional
show host. You've been doing this for so long. You know how to close out a show. You're now in my shoes in Texas. How are you closing us out?
Well, if you want to hear more of this wonderful sharing that we do, go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, and you will be able to enjoy. And also, of course, on Be Here Now, Ramdas's Be Here Now Network, we have wonderful other presenters, teachers, podcasters. Alan Watts, Krishnamurti just went up, Jack Cornfield and Sharon Salzberg and Krishnadas and Ramdas. So it's an exciting network if you're interested at all in anything around consciousness. And as I said before, when Michael asked what my thing was, so to speak, it is about trying to make available whatever traditions, mystic traditions, etc., have expounded on through the ages, practically available to get to a life in balance.
I love it. Raghu, thank you so much for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love. You've been a champion. You've been a sport. You've been incredible. And you've been super insightful all at once.
Thank you. Thank you. And you know what this comes from? When you put up the picture of Shirdi Sai Baba, everything changed. I like Audrey, but Shirdi Sai Baba.
Shirdi Sai Baba's coming up one last time. Anybody at home who wants to catch the scent of incense through two screens, it doesn't matter if it's 20, 30, make sure you're leaving a comment, as some people do, like, hey, I just caught the scent of flowers. What will you allow for? Forget the spiritual, forget the traveling, forget the woo-woo-woo and the classic everything else, the teachings. Just what will you allow for? That's the rub, just walking out your door each day. Okay, that's Sri Shirdi Sai Baba, the one from 100+ years ago, colorized photo, very beautiful. Let him do his thing. Yeah, he'll wink, smile, nod, and you can ask a question, just listen, be in your heart. And he speaks all languages, Japanese, Swahili, and everything else. I only speak a little bit of French. Okay, you are good. Thank you so much for being on the show, Raghu. It was a complete pleasure and treat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.